The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Hello and welcome to The Best in the World with Richard Parr, where each week I speak to a world or an Olympic champion to find out what they do differently from the rest of us to be the very best. I've recently been listening to a podcast called The Comedian's Comedian by Stuart Goldsmith. And unlike me, he just keeps this beginning bit very succinct and gets straight to the interview. So I'm going to do the same today because we've got a great guest for you. I am speaking to the 2008 kayaking K1 1000 metres Olympic champion, Tim Brabants. He's the first British canoeist to win a gold medal at the Olympics. It's a really good story because Tim is not only a champion in kayaking, but he's also a doctor working in an emergency room. So we talk about his career, how he managed to juggle both of these roles. We also talk about his world title victory in 2007, and he also talks about his new job with British Canoeing, where he's recently joined the performance coaching team. He's also really into his data and his technology, so we delve into that as well. So let's get to it. Let's speak to the kayaking Olympic champion from the 2008 Games, Tim Brabants.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Tim Brabants, welcome to The Best in the World with Richard Parr, a world and Olympic champion in sprint kayaking. It's so great to have you on the programme. Of course, we're going to talk about your incredible career, but first let's catch up with what you're up to at the moment, because of course you retired from the sport a few years ago.
Yeah, I retired in 2013, so shortly after London Olympics I realised it was the right time to retire from paddling. The whole way through my career I'd been developing an alternative career, which was medicine. So I'd qualified as a doctor in 2002 and had kept my hand in that, going back to being a doctor full-time for periods of about a year to 18 months immediately post each Olympic cycle. So I went back to being a doctor for a while, and then just recently, in fact 3 weeks ago, a big career change, and I've joined the performance coaching team for British Canoeing to coach the future champions within our sport.
Oh, fantastic. How's that been? How's the first 3 weeks? Is it like being back at school? First day back?
Yeah, it's kind of strange being on the other side of the boat, so to speak. Having been on the water, I've got a good understanding, having been coached and been an elite level sport for 20 years. It's great to have the opportunity to put back some of that knowledge I've got and some of the experience I've gained through working with lots of different coaches over the years, and start a new career as a coach, working with some very, very talented athletes at the moment.
Obviously, as you mentioned, you retired in 2013 and had a very successful career, and you now join this team, this performance coaching side of things. Is there anything that this team is doing that you've already seen in these 3 weeks that is different to what you were doing when you were competing?
When I was competing, I spent a lot of time training on my own because just how it worked out. In the early days, I had a group with me, and then latterly within my career, it just worked out that most of my training was done by myself, with just me and my coach, occasionally other people coming in. And we had a very sort of disparate group of athletes around the country, whereas fairly recently we've centralised our training base up to Nottingham, to Home Pierpont, the National Water Sports Centre, and that's made a big difference because you've got athletes from the Olympic and Paralympic programme across all disciplines are based here now. So the slalom, top end slalom guys are still down in Lee Valley, but the development team and fair few paddlers are still up here as well. So it's good having this centralised system, because you've got a wealth of knowledge and experience from different coaches and different parts of our sport are all together and mixed together with the sort of organising body within our sport as well, British Canoeing. So it's a good environment to be in, a really sort of professional, high performance environment with everything you need at your fingertips.
Was it lonely training by yourself?
Not really. Most of the time, I was quite happy. It was either just me on my own for certain sessions, sort of ones where I didn't really need a coach or anything, and then other times just me and the coach, and then other sessions with other people. I quite enjoyed that mix because at times you need to be able to just focus on yourself and the way you're paddling, and not be distracted by other people and training at different speeds and effort levels compared to the target you were trying to achieve. And then other times it's really good to have people to push you. So I found a good mix that I was quite happy with.
Yeah, I guess when you're the best in the world, it is hard to find people just as good as you. So hard to be able to push you quite as far. You said there that where you're based in Nottingham with the Federation now, it's got everything you need. Now, one of the videos I watched before doing this interview with you, you were talking about a lot of the data and analytics involved in the sport. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because for the normal spectator, all we're seeing is a man with a paddle in a boat, but there's a lot more to it than that, isn't there?
Yeah, it's something from early days as an athlete. My coach was very forward-thinking and progressive. So when heart rate monitors first started to become available, he was encouraging us to buy some really basic heart rate monitors that were very, very simple, not particularly reliable results, but we started in that view as the first bit of data we could record, and then we moved on to using the Nielsen-Kellerman rowing type speedometers on our boats that use a small propeller underneath the boat to measure speed. And then slowly, as GPS came in, we started having GPS units on our boat, again, which weren't massively accurate in their data. And it's kind of progressed on through from that now. So we have sensors on the paddle shaft to give you an idea of stroke rate. We're developing things to do with power transfer through the paddle shaft as well, GPS speed units. And so you can have a real-time feedback of your speed, your stroke rate, and your heart rate all in one watch sitting on the front of the boat. And then we've got other units as well, which are kind of commercially available, that are high-resolution GPS with accelerometers in that we have on the back of the boat. It has no display on it, that you can analyse after the session to give very, very accurate split results and speeds. And it allows us to build up a database over key sessions to monitor our improvement in our performance and race profiling.
Fantastic. And you mentioned heart rate there, and obviously being a doctor, I know you've worked in accident and emergency. Have you always been a person who's been attracted to places of high pressure? Because being an Olympic athlete is a lot of high pressure. Working in A&E, has that always been just your interest?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd quite describe myself as an adrenaline junkie, because that sounds wrong. That sounds like I'd like skydiving and skateboarding and dangerous things like that. I kind of assess risk with those things and avoid them. But I do certainly enjoy a relatively high pressure environment and high performance environment. A&E, I particularly enjoy the team aspect of it, because you're working alongside the doctors, nurses, porters, radiographers, various healthcare assistants, all within the department, that are all vital to enable the department to function appropriately. And it's a bit, very much the same within elite sport as well. You've got many different facets to the performance team, from the coaches, the athletes, the sport analysts, physios, massage people, and strength and conditioning coaches, along with a host of other people in the wider team that are all essential to the functioning of a high performance sporting team.
I guess one of the main differences is that in the operating theatre or in the A&E or everything like that, is you have to get it right every single day, don't you? But unlike, say, when you're training, you can make mistakes, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, you can argue that the consequences of making a mistake in training is not winning a race or not getting the result you want, which is, in the grand scheme of things, far less important than making a mistake that can affect somebody's health. But this is the performance sport side of things, is about getting people faster and stronger. And I think you have to still apply the same amount of effort level and thought process and seriousness to all the decisions we make, to ensure we help our athletes achieve the very, very best performance they can achieve in a safe, supported environment.
as you mentioned, you've been a qualified doctor since 2002, and it's out of all the 100-odd people I've spoken to on this podcast, you're one of the very few who was almost in another job and had another job ready when they retired. I want to get onto that more in just a moment, but was there anything in particular about having studied medicine that gave you an advantage in the boat?
I wouldn't have said that studying medicine particularly gave me an advantage. In actual fact, it was probably a disadvantage having done such a ridiculously intense degree and taken that career path, because I'm pretty confident I would have won more medals at more championships if I hadn't done medicine and if I just focused entirely on sport. But I wouldn't be the person I am today, or have had half the experiences and skill sets I have now if I hadn't done that. So the actual study of medicine doesn't help much when it comes to training, because you learn about the human body, obviously, and how it goes wrong, but you don't learn a lot about how high performance and training and how to make somebody faster. That sort of stuff you can pick up relatively quickly from a bit of bookwork. And most of our coaches here know the physiology of how to, what systems we're trying to train for each and every session, and you can pick that up relatively easily. But I think the key point was having something that I could rely on. It was essentially a vocational degree, so that when the time came when I either chose to retire from sport or could have been forced out through retirement or poor performance, that I had a career ready to go, because I think that certainly helped with the pressure side of things a lot, knowing that there was another option at the end of it. A lot of athletes reach the end of their careers and they don't know where they're going to go afterwards, and that can be particularly difficult for the athletes through the career. So I'm a firm believer in hard graft during the training process to build a bit of a plan. I took time out during university to focus on training, which allowed me to compete and train full time in the build up to Sydney Olympics in 2000, culminated in a medal from the games. So I think if you plan effectively, it can actually help your sports performance well. And within world-class funding program, UK Sport Lottery funding, we have performance lifestyle advisors. So we have a very good one that works with us called Emma Groom. She helps the athlete and encourages them and probably at times nags them to ensure that they've got something else going on in their life apart from just sport. Our head coach at the moment, René Elson, he also is the same, very, very keen to accommodate athletes who are at university at the moment. Like this morning, one of our guys, he's got lecture starting at 9, so he's in the gym at 7 this morning to try and get his session done in time before he could go to uni. And it's key, you have to have a kind of supportive environment around you in the training environment, and focusing on your studies or your career plans at one stage, and then being able to then step away from that and focus on your sport performance at other times.
And by the sounds of it, you come across as a very organised person, Tim. Has that always been the case?
I'm glad it comes across that way. I think I've always been fairly ambitious with my plans and my targets, and then made sure I strive to achieve them. It's been the hardest time recently, actually, because I was on a training in medicine. I'm training to be a consultant in emergency medicine, and I was reaching a point where I realised that I had this opportunity to leave the program and become a full-time sports coach, and that was a difficult decision, because I'd always achieved targets I'd set. I'd always become a doctor, I'd become an Olympic champion, a world champion, European champion. And the target I'd set myself was to become a consultant in emergency medicine. So it was a bit of a battle in my head to move away from that and think, actually, maybe I'm not going to achieve that. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. But sport has a funny way of pulling you back in. And when there's an opportunity to work with some really talented athletes and really talented coaches and support team, it's very hard to not want to be part of that.
With that process of making plans and goals, Tim, what do? Are you someone who will sit down for an hour, half an hour, write things down? Will you discuss with people? Will you set goals at certain intervals? What is your process for that?
So it depends very much. I mean, from the coaching side of things, I'm still learning my coaching style. So learning from other people. Some people are very, very plan driven, and the way we're operating at the moment is very much like a business would operate. We have our short, medium, and long term goals, and what we need to do to achieve those goals, and the targets we need to hit to get that, and it's all written down. We know what speeds and times we need to get to achieve certain outcomes, and we can monitor that, especially with, like we talked earlier about the performance analyst side of things. You can monitor your progress in that very, very well, which helps you along the way. And it also gives you positive encouragement that you're doing the right work.
So let's talk about your career and going on to become a world and Olympic champion. Obviously, you went into some very big races. What was your typical pre-race routine like?
So we talk about this a lot actually currently as well. So the routine is important to keep it as a routine. So sticking to the same things as much as possible, because that helps mitigate your anxiety levels to a massive degree. I also firmly believe in putting yourself in uncomfortable situations regularly, which enables you to be used to that sensation. It's like when you go into an exam and you rock up at the exam, it's incredibly stressful, but most people aren't used to putting themselves under that much pressure. But going into medical school finals, there's a lot of pressure, but I'd already sat the start line of world and Olympic finals at that stage. And you know that once you put a lot of effort and work into trying to achieve something, it's just part of the process of achieving it is to go and deliver it based on the hard work you've put in. So keeping that routine helps with the nerves, reminding yourself the amount of effort and work you put in. And with that, whilst a big competition, for me, probably the highest pressure was Beijing Olympic final in the 1,000 metres, because I was world champion from the year before. Everything pointed towards the fact that I should be winning this race. And if I didn't, that's probably was my only opportunity in my whole career to become Olympic champion, a realistic opportunity to become Olympic champion. But everything had gone well in training. I knew I was fit, fast and strong. There's absolutely no reason I could see why I couldn't be. So you just stick to the same routine, the same warm-up routine, the same sort of mental rehearsal, physical rehearsal, and thinking of the same race plan, and not getting distracted by things around you. Because things do change around you, and you just have to make sure that you are robust enough to cope with those changes without being distracted, which would stop you delivering a decent performance.
So what was your personal routine, Tim? What would you do on the morning of a race day, for example?
So my plan would always start the night before with packing my bag with the kit I needed, making sure I had my body number, the vest, the racing stuff, kit to warm up and cool down in, knowing what bus I was going to get if for a race, a competition, and you had to rely on the sort of organised buses down to the course, having a backup bus plan as well, what time I was going to get up, what time I was going to have breakfast, when I was going to leave, and then when I got to the course, I'd know what time I'd roughly get there, and then know how to fill pretty much every minute of that time. Some of it would be sitting, thinking, focusing. Other times would be warming up on the land, then going out for a water-based warm-up. I'd normally go out an hour and 20 before the start time of my race, spend about 20-25 minutes on the water warming up, come back in, get changed into my race kit. It's just, relax a bit, run through my race plan in my head, and then and get ready to go out 20-25 minutes before the start time of my race again. Keeping an awareness around me as well as to the timetable, and if they're running to time, because you don't want to be going out in the water and then suddenly finding that they're running 20 minutes late, and you're going to be out in the water for 40 minutes instead of 20 minutes before your race. So keeping that same routine, whether I was racing a domestic competition in the UK or Olympic final overseas, keeping that routine, it gave me some familiarity of what I was trying to do and what I was trying to achieve, and that certainly helped with the nerves side of things, so I knew what I was going to be doing.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
We'll have more from Tim in just a moment, but I want to tell you that Audible is one of the leading suppliers of audiobooks in the world. They've got over 180,000 titles for you to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle or MP3 player. I really use their product. I've listened to books by Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Andreas Iniesta, Daniel Bryan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, all various different sports books, and you can get one free audiobook download if you want to test out their service. All you got to do is go to audibletrial.com/best. That will give you a free 30-day trial of their service that includes one free audiobook download. Perhaps it's one of those great sports books that I have just mentioned, because I highly recommend them. So go and check it out, audibletrial.com/best. All right, let's return to the conversation with Tim Brabants.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
As you mentioned there, 2007 world champion, 2008 Olympic champion, and that was your third Olympics. You've been at Sydney, you got a bronze there, no medals in 2004. What was different in that Olympic cycle from 2004 to 2008? What were you doing differently that helps you become the best in the world?
It was mainly getting the balance right. I'd qualified as a doctor in 2002, as I say, and then I was trying to work as a doctor part-time. I just got married. I was living in Nottingham. The main coaching group was down in London. I was commuting backwards and forwards, and I hadn't hit quite the right balance. And I think when it came out to Athens as well, I broke the world record in the heat, so I was on good physical form, but hadn't had really consistent delivery of sort of podium winning performances in the build up to then. And so after Athens, I went back to medicine full time for 18 months, kind of worked on just general fitness. So when I came back into the sport, I came back in as a full-time athlete for the first time ever in my career, and spent 2.5 years building up to Beijing Olympics as a full-time athlete with a sole focus on performance. I was resting properly, recovering properly, making gains in the gym, on the water, and in competition, and started to consistently perform. So I was getting to the point where I'd go to the World Cups and the Europeans and Worlds knowing I was going to get a medal in whatever event I did, and just knowing it was either going to be a gold, silver, and sometimes a bronze. And so that confidence in my own ability and performance brought me into Beijing in a really good, strong place, so that I knew I'd done everything right coming into it, that only mechanical failure or severe illness or injury was going to stop me from winning.
And I was watching back that Olympic final, and it was an incredible performance, and you won by what, in my opinion, quite a relatively big distance, and there were thousands of people watching, people riding along on bikes. Obviously, you've got a lot of eyes there, probably more eyes than you would get for a normal meet in kayaking. How were you able to not be nervous? What was it, just that routine again?
Yeah, I mean, in Sydney, I was massively inspired by the whole Olympic movement, being my first games, and I think that helped get me to raise my game to be able to deliver a medal there. And so I found it a really positive experience. I didn't find it distracting. I tried to keep a level head to remember what I was there to do. I wasn't there to, enjoy the Olympics like a lot of people get to, if that makes sense. You enjoy it, but it's only on reflection afterwards. We were raced in the second week of the games right up until pretty much the last day. So you're not going to get to go and watch other competitions and watch other people compete and get their medals. We shared a hotel with the rowers in Beijing, and you'd see them coming back and they got their gold medals. And I'm not a believer in superstition and things, but I didn't want to be distracted by looking at their medals and like holding their Olympic gold medals, because at that point I'd never held an Olympic gold medal myself.
I hear that's a faux pas.
Yeah, I don't know. I was super confident that I was going to win my own, so I was just like, just be patient, and I couldn't wait to get racing. So I think it's just important to remember that you're racing against the same athletes you've raced against maybe 3-4 weeks before at a World Cup. It's the same officials, the same starters, the same coaches, the same people around in the boat shed environment as any other competition. It just has a different label and more people on the bank watching. So as long as you stay focused, the way I raced in Beijing, I followed the same race plan I did as any other time, but it just happened that I was out in front. I didn't have to change my race plan, and I hadn't raced like that internationally before, in terms of I'd always had a good battle with other people normally in front of me and passing them in the last bit. So it's just sticking to the same race plan, not getting overexcited and not going out too early, too fast, and you can pay massive dividends at the end if you're not careful.
No, I mentioned about the medal there because on a previous episode I spoke to Susan Francia, the rowing Olympic champion, and she was telling me that Kobe Bryant touched her gold medal before he went to compete, and he actually still went on to win. But she was like, "What are you doing? This is a faux pas. You shouldn't be touching this medal."
Well, yeah, so I'm not superstitious. It was more just that I was very confident I was going to win one myself. So I thought I'll just wait.
Exactly. It forces you to really go for it even more to make sure you win your own. Were there any sports, though, that you were able to learn anything from which helped you? Or is there anything that you've seen recently which might help you in your coaching?
I like... when you go to the Olympics, you get given a form you have to fill in with all sorts of demographic information about yourself and interesting facts and this and that and the other. And one of them is about who do you see as a sporting idol or mentor and this kind of thing. And I never really had anyone in particular, but I'd always take bits and pieces from lots of different people, stuff I liked about them, and the way they conducted themselves and how I'd take that forward. So I always liked the people that were basically quietly confident, didn't make a big scene, very, very talented, humble in victory and gracious in defeat type of thing. And realising that if there's other people out there, some people are going to have a bad day and not perform, and you need to support them just as well as those that, when good days when you're performing and other people support you.
Who are a couple of the examples, Tim?
Yeah, well, so one big example was in Beijing. Was my biggest rival in the 2 years up until that time was one of the Canadian guys, Adam Van Koeveren, massively talented paddler. He's been Olympic champion, Olympic silver medalist in the past, world champion in the past. He and I always had a good battle on the water. World championships the year before, it was fractions of a second between us, the first and second, and the same all year in the build up to Beijing. But in the 1,000 meters, he just some reason had a bad race. It was all going well, and then he just started to drift backwards as people came past him and ended far down the final, which is a really unusual result for him. He still came up and congratulated me like it was the best thing ever. The guy that came third, Kenny Wallace, the Australian, had the race of his life, and Adam still exactly the same. Well done, Kenny. That's an awesome result. Really positive, massive personal disappointment for him, but hugely positive and nice to everyone else that had performed. And that stood out for me as a really key thing and key way to behave. And it's the same the next day in the 500 meter final. He hadn't been beaten in 500 meters in a single race since Athens, and got beaten then. So the two things that stood out for me was his resilience to have that poor performance the day before, but still come back and make the podium. But also the way he reacted to coming second for the first time in 4 years in that environment. And that was a really good thing to see, and something I'd encourage. And those are the sort of values that I try and encourage within the athletes I'm going to work with now.
Sounds like a class act. It'd be great to get him on the podcast at some point too, as well.
Adam would be an amazing person on a podcast. But you see the same sort of thing. You're watching the Winter Olympics at the moment. I love watching these things. I love watching other sports and seeing the way they react, and the winners and the losers, and seeing the positive bits and the negative bits. But our two British skeleton bob athletes, so Lizzie and
Laura Dees.
Yeah. So the way they were in the interview the following day, Lizzie was in tears based on what Laura was saying about her, all the positive things that she was saying about her, and it was such a nice thing to see. And you saw that real, true teamwork, trying to achieve the results and what it means to them. And there's a lot of positives you can get from seeing people like that. And I think there's a lot of those sort of people around involved in sport. We're all essentially amateur sports people in thrust into the limelight for a very brief period when it comes to the Olympic Games.
Yeah, it's amazing. You don't hear about Elise Christie for 3 years, and then you can't not turn on a radio station, a TV channel without hearing about her for 2 weeks.
Exactly, and then they'll disappear again for another 3 years. But never mind, they're still training, competing, winning world championships left, right, and centre. Like I said, and that's the thing that's what's interesting is that the world, you're racing the same people, and getting a world championship gold medal is amazing. But it's just the Olympics carries something different about it. Even though you're racing the same people, it just seems to carry that extra weight. Including the extra disappointment when you don't achieve, and it's a really hard thing to deal with. You've got to wait another 4 years until you can try and do the same again, and a lot happens in 4 years.
Was there any race in particular that you lost which really you struggled to cope with for a little while?
Not really. I think I was always fairly realistic. I appreciated all the good races I had. I was more often surprised by good performance and disappointed by bad performance. Yeah, the times when I haven't raced as well, I could justify the reasons why. London, for example, seemed like a really bad result for me because I was finishing the bottom of the final. But it was actually my best result in 2 years, following a major shoulder injury and required surgery and things to fix. So I could take the disappointment was how you'd view it externally based on my previous results. But if you looked at how I'd gone that year and the progression I was making following the surgery, it was actually my best result in 2 years. Yeah. So that was a disappointment in terms of it. I would love to have finished my last Olympics on a high. But I have no regrets from training and competing and fighting my way to get to London Olympics and delivering a solid performance anyway.
Yeah, representing your home country on home soil. So how do you relax, Tim, if you even get any time to do any of that? When you're not thinking about or watching sport or being involved in medicine, what do you do just to chill?
So I'm all grown up now. As I say, I got married now. I've got 2 young kids, 5 and 7. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of spending time with them. Time with the family to me is massively important. Is another reason why I was kind of getting more encouraged into coaching with the medical side of things. Was the shift work and the shift patterns were taking you away from your family, not just physically away, but also mentally, because you were just exhausted whenever I was home. And so time with the family is a key way to relax for me. Doing normal family type things, going away camping and playing in the garden and doing silly things like that. And then I'm a bit of a geek as well. I radio control flying planes and helicopters and silly things like that.
Drones?
It's funny you should mention that. One of the coaches has one that we tried out a couple of days ago as part of our sport analysis side of things. So we actually were filming some of our athletes on the water. So filming them from directly overhead, front, side, back, getting perspectives that you can't see from the bank, to try and improve the way that we coaching technique and how we might make some adaptations to boats and to try and improve performance. So there's a weirdly full circle from my sort of hobby stuff from when I was a kid through to potentially using that in high performance sport as well.
Did you learn anything from those first bits of filming?
Yeah, it was really useful. So we were looking at the way, looking overhead of one of the athletes, at how the boat was yawing, so the back moving side to side with the paddling, which will give us a bit of an idea of whether we need to change anything. Like the sprint boats we have are very long, designed to go in a straight line, and have a small rudder on the back to help you steer, but also to keep it in a straight line. And so we might end up trying a larger rudder to see if that helps the boat yaw less. It can have the converse effect that it can actually make it drag more, so it could actually slow you down even though it yaws less. But we can see it, we can test it, try it and reanalyze and see if it makes any difference.
Did you fiddle a lot and adjust and innovate your equipment a lot while you were competing?
No, not particularly. I thought about those sort of things. I thought about innovations, but I actually like to keep things very stock. So my boats were from Nello in Portugal, and I had a boat that could go away on a trailer to competitions. One that I'd have based at the club for training in, another one I'd keep at home that I could take on my car for training in different locations. And they're all stock set up exactly the same. So I was very, very comfortable that if I had a major issue at a competition, I could just jump in another boat, put my seat footrest in the same places, and would be absolutely fine. For me, that was about building in robustness into the way I was competing and training. And that works really well. I mean, we're kind of innovating more and more now in terms of training techniques and styles. A few little bits and pieces in the boats, but fairly simple fittings that can be just transferred from one boat to another to help improve your transfer of power from paddle into moving the boat forwards.
Well, that makes sense. Well, Tim, it's been really good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time today. Before you go, is there anywhere in particular where you can continue to follow your journey online, perhaps on Twitter or somewhere like that?
So I do have a Twitter account, just at Tim Brabants. I'm pretty poor at using it, but I'm trying to. I used it more through the games, but I'm starting to try and use it a bit more, and also use it to promote some of the other athletes within our sport and some of the massive talent that there is out there from our sport and other sports. And like I say, the people I find quite inspiring within sport and the experiences that and values that they show, I think it's quite important. I can try and share some of that on the Twitter platform as well.
Fantastic. Are there any names we should be looking out for in the next few years?
So we've got the usual names. So Liam Heath, who was Olympic champion in the K1 200 last year, and Johnny Schofield, who they're silver medalists in Rio as well, and in the K2. They've now partnered up with a few other guys looking towards the K4, which 500, which is a new event coming into Tokyo. So we're yet to see the complete crew combination, but we've got other young guys coming through like Lewis Fletcher, Ian James, Matt Robinson, Stellian, and Trevor Thompson, who are amazing athletes, and then some really talented girls. The girls K4 at the moment is looking very exciting. Again, crews to be firmed up, but watch this space. I think we're going to get some really good results. That's in the guys I train. And then our women's C2 class, which is a new class fairly recently. We've got some very, very strong athletes coming through that as well. I think we'll be medal hopefuls for Tokyo.
Oh, superb. And Tokyo will be here with us before we even know it. Only 2 years now.
That's the great thing with the Winter Olympics. You only have to wait 2 years before you can start watching and enjoying another Olympics.
Yeah, we'll be back again soon. Well, Tim, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thank you for being the best in the world.
Thanks, Richard.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Wonderful to speak to Tim. If you're into your canoeing, you might want to go back and listen to my interview with Etienne Stott. That's episode 14 of The Best in the World with Richard Parr. He was a canoe slalom Olympic champion. We've also spoken to David Florence, who is a canoe slalom world champion. All of them are on iTunes and on Stitcher. Just search Best in the World with Richard Parr. Go back and listen to those episodes, and please give us a rating and review and press that subscribe button. And of course, if you enjoy it, tell your friends, because that is the best way to spread the news and the information that we gain from the best sports stars on the planet. Alright, I'll be back next week speaking to another world or an Olympic champion, world record holder, or world number one on The Best in the World with Richard Parr. Until then, have a great week.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.